So thank you all for hopping on for our workshop here with Sadel Trabovsky, the founder and CEO of Open Grants. We're excited to have one of our ecosystem partner workshops to discuss grants for startups, the definitive freelance and startup guide. My name's Cameron Law, and I'm the executive director of the Carlson Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. If you don't know what the Carlson Center is all about, we serve as a regional hub and platform for providing approachable and accessible entrepreneurial education, community, and support to enable you as a startup founder to be able to explore and launch your business. We have a mission to make innovation and entrepreneurship pervasive throughout the greater Sacramento region. And we envision this region really being a premier hub of innovation and entrepreneurship. And how we've gone to operationalize on that mission and vision is to support you along that entrepreneurial journey. And so we've really built resources to help you at those different stages. And those stages for us are called the discover, build, and launch phases. This is one of our ecosystem partner workshops, which is all about discovering and providing those on-ramps into that entrepreneurial journey. And so we're really excited to have Sadel, who's a local entrepreneur in this region, come and share with you about how to access grants. I've had the pleasure of seeing Sadel grow as an entrepreneur and his many entrepreneurial ventures. We both worked out of a space at Impact Venture Capital, where I got to see him work on Gorilla Digital, Carbon Blue, and now Open Grants. And so excited to see him going forward. And so before we hop in, I want to just do kind of a more formal introduction of who he is and share a little bit about his bio. Sadel has been an entrepreneur since childhood. After high school, he quickly grew bored of that college and ended up dropping out. And so he jumped into honing his leadership skills through outdoor guiding and education through that. And now he jumped in to run a new company called Open Grants. But before that, he served as the CEO of Carbon Blue, a successful venture-backed startup solving challenges in the clean vehicle and fleet management space. And he's also led that company through the MVP and secured a pipeline of over $1.5 million in government contracts. And so we're really excited to have this experienced entrepreneur share a little bit about how to access grants as a startup and also how to be a freelance grant writer and empower you to go access grant funding as a startup. So without further ado, I'll pass it on over to you, Sadel, and take us through this wonderful workshop. So I'll stop sharing and you can take the screen away.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the intro, Cameron. Really appreciate that. Super excited to be here with everyone. As we roll through this presentation, I know Cameron will be keeping an eye on some of the questions and things, so feel free to pop in questions. I'll stop at a few different places to do some Q&A after some specific points. So feel free to bring things up as you see as we're going along, and we'll try to allow time for that. And then afterwards, I will drop in LinkedIn and Twitter if you want to connect with me, and happy to be a resource for anyone working in this space. So as Cameron said, I've been an entrepreneur all of my life, have really been lucky and fortunate enough to have enjoyed success in building companies. And I'm super excited to share Open Grants with all of you for a couple of reasons. One, because and let me share my screen here. Sorry about that. So one of the main reasons I'm really excited about sharing Open Grants with all of you is because Open Grants and our mission is really about empowering entrepreneurs to leverage the incredible amount of resources that are available for you in the public sector. And I think that frequently entrepreneurs don't have it, certainly I didn't when I first started, don't have a good idea of what's just available to you. There are billions, literally, of dollars in grant funding that are available from federal and state government, as well as a variety of foundations that invest heavily in entrepreneurs and the folks on their entrepreneurial journey, whether that be an entrepreneur working in social, business innovation, or impact, or technology innovation. So maybe you're changing the world and solving homelessness. Maybe you are really helping Main Street transition to the digital age, or maybe you are, building the next generation of quantum computers. But whatever you're engaged in, there's great opportunities in the public sector to leverage non-dilutive capital instead of raising venture as a first means of securing funding for your startup. So one of the reasons that's super exciting, and just real quickly for those who aren't familiar, when you raise venture capital, or you have debt out there, you either have to repay it, so you owe someone back some money, or you end up selling some of your company, which means you don't own that part of your company anymore. So the cool thing about grants is you don't have to pay them back, and you don't lose any of your company. They're non-dilutive. They don't dilute your ownership. So that's, one of the things that's really exciting about this space. So Open Grants in a nutshell is a place where entrepreneurs can come in, they can find grant funding, and then they can get matched to the right people to help them navigate and execute on that mission. But I'm not really here to talk about Open Grants. I'm here to talk about grant funding. And as I was just saying, grants are an award. They are strategic capital to help you move some initiative forward. So once again, while we see a vast amount of grant funding out there, the three main buckets that we see are social innovation, business innovation, or technology innovation. So you're either working on some sort of new science or research, you are doing something really innovative with business, or you are solving some social problem. Grants are gifts, but they come with some strings attached because they are so otherwise, useful. So typically they require some kind of reporting. They usually require that you do something really specific with them. So you don't often find grants that are just for like operating capital for your startup, but you will find grants that say, hey, we want you to, develop the next generation of lasers for the military, or we want you to solve homelessness for this population of immigrants that in this community that we serve. So those are the kind of things that grants are really built around, some kind of strategic activity. So that's what a grant is. Once again, to like summarize, they're non-dilutive, so they don't dilute your ownership of the company. You don't have to pay them back, and they are usually strategic. So that means that they're for something very specific. And the cool thing about grants is that you get to tell people what specific thing that you want to do with their money. And then if they decide that they want to fund you, that's, you don't have to like try to go find fit usually. Typically you're pitching some concept and they're giving you grant money to go do that thing. So apart from being those things, grants are much more. And I know these slides are kind of dense. I'm going to blaze through them and you'll have them available later. These are really designed as pass along slides. So grants, first and foremost, are also a really great signal for your startup. They allow the venture community and others in business to see that you have something legitimate that the government's interested in buying, which is really cool, or that somebody is interested in paying for. They're also a partnership. So a grant with the right organization. So if you enter into a grant relationship with the state of California, for example, that's a legitimate, like you are now partnered with the state of California. So that's a pretty cool thing for an early stage company to be able to say and to be able to execute on. It's like, hey, our partner is the state of California. Our partner is the U.S. Navy. Our partner is the Gates Foundation. Those are some names that hold some clout, and it opens up that network for you. So that's another thing that a grant is. Grants are non-dilutive, as I said, and they're also a sale. Ultimately, you've gone and sold your services at really favorable terms to a customer when you get a grant. So that's super exciting. And those are some big milestones for an early stage company. And so what this presentation is going to focus on is, first and foremost, how do you navigate and become aware of grants? How do you access and win them? And then I'm going to go into a shorter presentation that digs into really like, all right, so as an entrepreneur, how do you become a freelance grant writer, or how do you develop the skills to go after grants, and what are the kind of tools you need to be successful? Because I understand, like, really good grant writers on our platform, for example, they bill anywhere from $150 to $380 an hour. There's some pretty big kind of ticket items out there, and when it comes to engaging a good grant writer or grant consultant, and it can be quite expensive, and there are opportunities for you to do it yourself. So that's what I'm going to focus on in this presentation. One of the first things I want to address is, can startups use grants? Of course you can. Grants are a great tool for startups, and there are a million, literally, actually $750 billion worth of grants in 2019. So there's lots of money on the table. There's a couple nuances to grant funding that I want to make sure everyone understands. And the first one is that as a startup, you might be thinking, all right, well, do I need to be a nonprofit? What if I'm a LLC? How does this all work? There's a lot of questions and things to unpack there, but something that I want to note is that while most grants have a certain stipulation and some of them say, all right, we award only to nonprofits. Others say they award only to small businesses. And some grants go only to large corporations. In every one of those situations, there's an opportunity for you to partner with a company that's the prime applicant. So one thing I want to just bring up on this webinar is you don't have to be the prime applicant for a grant proposal. You can be a subcontractor. And sometimes that can be a much better relationship, because then you don't have to worry about, getting everything all prepared and submitting a proposal. You just get to like show up, do your thing, and they cut you a check, and that's it. And so that can be a really nice relationship as a startup. It can be a really good way also to develop some credibility in the space. Frequently, what you'll see is that a lot of grantors like to see that you've received grants before. It's one of those things where it's like, hey, we want you to have experience. Well, how am I going to get experience if you won't give me a job, right? So that happens in the grant world, unfortunately. And so currently, a great way to address that is to be a subcontractor a few times before you actually go and apply as a prime contractor for a grant. The other thing that I just will go through real quickly here is that there are a lot of different places to find grants. The first place, Google. Just Google around, look for some grants. Obviously, selfishly, I would suggest Open Grants as the best place to go find grant funding. However, and it's free. You can sign up, create a profile, and get connected to all the grants that are out there. However, there's some great resources online to find grants and to educate yourself about the space. Grants.gov is one of them. The SBA website is a great one. And the NSF Seed Fund website is also a really great resource. So you can look around for a lot of different ways to find grants, but something that you should know is that you want to get started now. So in fact, you wanted to get started like a month ago, but basically by the time you're actually reading an RFP that's been published, you're probably going to be a little late to the game. And so there's a variety of things that I'll suggest that allow you to be prepared to go after grant funding. And I'll get into that in a little bit later in the presentation when we talk about just the tools and the ways that the things that you can do to go after grants and be successful. Just a kind of visual representation, some of the places you can find grants for startups. And now this, we'll go into this a bit more in depth, but the question on everyone's mind usually is like, all right, we kind of know that grants are out there and we generally can find them, but how do we win? How do we become competitive? And this is something that I think is, really compelling. So one of the teams that I worked on and worked with for several years, our team as a group was successful 97% of the time, developed over $5 billion in projects. And they were just, is just exceptional, right? A really high performing team. And a couple of the things though, that make those folks successful, and anyone who's like, all right, I win 99% of the time. It's really not a case of they win 99% of the time because they're writing a lot of grants. It's a case of they know when to say no, and they know how to navigate the space to find the grant opportunity that really is a good fit for their organization. So the two things that, how do you win grants? Well, the first thing is to follow the rules. There's a sort of a technical component, right? And while it sounds super simple, I'll say that we have seen, every time, for example, the CEC, the California Energy Commission, puts out a grant solicitation, you'll see 5 or 6 companies that get disqualified. And what that means is that they didn't follow the rules. Now, considering that they had to spend 1 to 3 months of time and probably 10 to 20 grand on each application, that's a big waste of time to get disqualified just because you couldn't follow the rules. That means that no one even saw their great idea. They might have had an incredible transformative concept that they wanted to get funded, and no one saw it because they didn't follow the rules. So that's the first thing to know, is there's these really hard and fast rules within the grants world. And depending on the RFP, the rules will all be in the kind of the document where they're soliciting proposals from you. And as you read through that document, that's the first thing you need to be able to do to be successful, is simply follow the rules. And, the worst part of all of that is, I think sometimes the government misses out on some great opportunities there, but that's how it works. So follow the rules. But the second part, this is the important one, is learning to be a good partner. And I invite you to think about pursuing grant funding just like a sales relationship. So the same way that you understand that your clients aren't going to give you a contract on that first call typically. And especially if it's a high ticket, a high dollar amount that you're looking for, you know that you're not going to make that sale on that first call. You have to build a relationship, warm them up, have several meetings, and then you sell them on it. And that's the same, government is the same way, especially government, but also foundations. Grantors, generally speaking, they're looking for good partners. They want to know that their money's going to be, administered properly. They want to know that you're going to do the right thing and that you're not going to violate any terms of the contract. And so they're looking for you to build a relationship first. And so this is a great segue into the next bit of this presentation. But effectively, you need to develop a kind of a sales outreach mentality when you're trying to go after grants. And you need to build relationships with those agencies. Keep in mind, especially with the U.S. government, they are civil servants. They're there to serve you. So you can have meetings with them. You can reach out to them. They're supposed to be accessible. And if they're not, maybe take it over their heads to their boss. But their job is to serve you as citizens and as stakeholders. So leverage that. That's something that you can do to really make sure that they understand that you're going to be a good partner, that you're going to do the things you say you're going to do. So our process for being successful with grant funding is really based on the core components and tenets of some of the more successful teams I've worked on. And it starts with, first and foremost, doing your research. What that means effectively is, understand who's in your space and who's funding in your space and what kind of things they're interested in doing. So if you're in the medical device area, maybe you're looking for funding for a new kind of catheter, but maybe your catheter actually helps surgeons, perform procedures more efficiently and is specifically designed to be deployed in rural areas. So maybe you end up looking at funding for rural hospitals and development of medical capacity in rural areas, and that's where you end up working. So you want to get really creative and also get really granular about who you're working with. So doing your research, building out basically the same way that you would prospect for leads, right? When you're developing a sales program, you don't just kind of flail around. You start doing your research and you understand, all right, these are the kind of people we think we're going to sell to. These are the things we think they do. So we're going to go and look at these areas and industries. And we're going to figure out what's going on. And then we're going to develop a list of leads that we can reach out to. And we're going to start doing cold outreach and cold calls and see who we can leverage in our network to get connected to them. And then we're going to make a list of people we can sell, and then you create a funnel, right? So that's the same thing that you want to do with with your research process. Build a funnel, figure out who you're going to be strategically pursuing, and then start to really, do that outreach. Following the rules, of course, already mentioned that, super important. Being honest and just being a responsible actor, very important. And then finally, you want to be a partner as well. So you want to really dive into exactly what are the goals that that agency has, and how can you help them fulfill the goals? So don't just come in with your own agenda. Figure out what their agenda is and start to understand how their agenda aligns with the things you're accomplishing, and tell them that story. That's how you become a great partner, and that's how you get funded, frankly. So that's our process in a nutshell. I'm going to go ahead and stop here and ask if there's any questions. I saw a few things happening in chat, but yeah, if anyone has any questions so far, I'm happy to answer them, and feel free to just sort of raise your hand or put a question in the chat.
Yeah, and I threw in the chat, if you have any and you want to shoot it to me in a private one, I can help bring it into Sidel as we go forward. There was just one more logistics question. Will they be able to access this PowerPoint, but in more of a PDF format, obviously? But is that something you're able to share?
Yeah, I'll definitely send along the PDF of this. Yeah, it is a bit text heavy, and I apologize for that, but it will be great reading for you.
Perfect. So there's two questions in here. Can any business qualify for grants? Meaning if it's not something innovative necessarily, but a startup, in the case it's an IT services company, would that qualify?
Yeah. So it's a good question. Generally speaking, you might be hard pressed to find like a good fit, and it's hard to answer just generally like IT services. But for example, there are all kinds of grant funding for IT services delivered to rural communities. So maybe, but without having full understanding of the business, I can't really answer that question. However, generally speaking, I'd say, yeah, there's opportunities to work in different grant programs or potentially qualify for some grant funding. But it really, unfortunately, the general answer is yes, but it depends.
Awesome. So we got like 5 questions here. I don't know if you want to tackle them at the end or tackle a couple of them. I know they'll start adding up. So I would want your thoughts, Sadell.
Let's why don't I field a couple of these and then I can keep going and maybe tackle some of them. This is a good break point before I get into like the ins and outs of like freelance grant writing and grant writing tools and things like that.
Perfect. Okay, so here's maybe some easier ones. So do we have to pay taxes on grants?
I'm not a tax professional, so this isn't like any kind of advice, but typically, yes, you're going to want to work with your CPA though. And it does depend on like your tax structure and their tax structure, and there's a lot of variables. So,
do you know if EU-based startups are eligible for U.S. government grants?
That's a great question. So really cool. There's something really cool about this. So as you may know, EU-based companies also under the direction of the EU can be eligible for grants in the EU. And there's actually these really cool funding relationships that exist between like the National Institute, the National Science Foundation, for example, here, and that component in the EU. And so not only can you sometimes qualify for funding here, but sometimes you can double down on that funding in the EU. There's these sister relationships that have been built out for collaborative study across borders. So it's a really cool thing, and highly recommend that you look into it. Super cool opportunities to maybe do research, leverage labs and capacities that we have here that you may not have there, and also to leverage human capital that may be located in different areas of the world.
All right, thank you. Let's maybe 2 or 3 more. Are the feds required to provide feedback or critique? In the context was this individual went through the process and was a finalist, but didn't win after all. So are they required to get feedback and critiques?
Typically, that will be determined by the program. So generally speaking, they do want to give feedback, and we've found that even if it doesn't specifically call out that that's part of their process, that they will. I encourage you, once again, this is about these are your civil servants. So think of them that way. And, while that doesn't mean that you can just order them around, it does mean that you can use them as a resource. So reach out, talk to them. They're human beings, be human with them. And they tend to reciprocate in a really good way. So.
All right. And so there was one comment. Are you able to go back a slide to the companies that give out grants from just to look at that slide? And while you're doing that, the next question would be, how would you find partners that are getting the grants to be a subcontractor? So if you're interested in being a subcontractor, how would you identify a partner to be with?
Great question. So this is the slide. This is not comprehensive. This is just a few of a universe of opportunities and places. Open Grants is comprehensive, just FYI, and it's free. So, but there's a lot of places that give out grants. It's a great question. How do you find these subcontracting opportunities? This is a huge problem. It's something that Open Grants is solving, and I invite you to sign up on our platform and see how we're solving it. But Otherwise, really, there's two main ways. So when you see an RFP, you will sometimes see teaming lists published. And those will be a great place to find people to subcontract with. And you can do outreach. Basically, the government will host these teaming lists online and in different places. Grants.gov is one place. The EERE for the Department of Energy. Like, each agency has its own kind of method of doing this. It's not great and not super effective, but it's kind of what they try to do. When you're looking to find to be a subcontractor, there's not a lot of good options, unfortunately. The teaming list is about as good as it gets. One thing to think about is the other. There's a few websites that are set up. One is called the Innovation Exchange by the California Energy Commission. So if you're in the energy space, that's one place. And then Open Grants is like a generalist area where you can do that. But there's not a lot of other good options other than word of mouth. And that's one of the things that we're trying to solve at Open Grants is, for a long time, a lot of these mechanisms have been kind of like in this culture of incumbency. Everyone kind of understands, like, they're the people who've been coming to the trough and getting the capital every time. And not a lot of other people have had access. So as you look to break into the space and potentially be a subcontractor or be a prime on a grant, there's a lot to navigate. And so I suggest two things. One, first, look for the teaming list. That's a great way. You can secure the services of a consultant or contractor who can kind of help you navigate, but also build those relationships. The people at the agencies will frequently be aware of, like, the big names that are working on things, and they can make those connections for you. And there's no rules against that. So really, once again, build relationships with those civil servants, build close relationships with the agencies, and then, you can use tools like Open Grants as well. But if you're just like doing it on your own, that's like the first line of defense. Is like, once you figure out who the agency you want to work with, talk to them and ask who they're looking for, because they also have goals to, like, deploy capital not only to the big guys but also to small businesses. And so they encourage these things to happen. They just simply don't know how to do what they're supposed to be doing because no one's given them any tools, and it's a real problem. So help them out. Go and say, hey, we're here, we're doing this thing, we'd like to be a subcontractor. Who do you know who could use our help?
Awesome. So we have 3 questions, but I think if we want to, I don't know how much time you have for the other section. So if we want to push those to the end, then we can do that.
Yeah, let's, I'll stop sharing for a minute. I can answer a couple more questions. Okay. And while I pull up the second half of this presentation. Perfect. And we're making pretty good time, so happy to answer some more questions.
So I will, the first question will be from Isaiah, and then Dennis, and then Michelle. So those will be the 3 that we got. And then all after we'll do at the end. So the first question is, do you feel that pursuing micro grants, so 1,000 to 5,000, are a good use of energy or time?
Not at all. I think unless it's literally like, sign up for this form and we might give you 5,000. If they require any kind of application short of, like, uploading your deck that you already have and, putting in your name, just forget it. Like, if you're having to spend effort and time, you might as well go after 100K, 50K, 250, 1 to 5K. It just doesn't move the needle for most startups. So I would encourage you to not do that unless it's literally like, if you can sign up with your LinkedIn profile or whatever, then, maybe go for it. But
nice. All right. Next one is, does Open Grants allow for searching for grants by set aside? So example, a service disabled, veteran owned small business.
100%. Yeah. What you'll want to do is, we allow companies to create profiles on our platform for free, and you can assert and upload that information, and then you'll get matched to things that fit that profile. So, yeah.
Awesome. And then, so the last one until we move on is, are the platforms you shared for grants, do they cost to see what grant options are available? This person's found some of them cost just to see what grants are open.
Yeah, there's a lot of that out there. The ones that I've shared are all either public agency sites that are free to use because they're public, and Open Grants is free to actually access and use and search the grants. There are paid tiers to our platform, but Yeah, there's not a lot of free tools like ours out there where they've aggregated everything in one spot. But grants.gov, californiagrants.gov, SBIR.gov, SBA, those are all government sites, and they're all free to access. It just takes some time to mow through it all. BetaSam, another, it's totally free to access, but the UX and UI is atrocious, and no one knows what's going on there. So.
All right, so we got 2 lined up for at the end of the freelance part.
Awesome. All right, very cool. Well, I'm going to bring up and start sharing this presentation here. And this one I'll also make available. I think I saw some notes from some folks about my contact info. I'm happy to drop my LinkedIn and Twitter into the chat afterwards. So just so you're aware. So you want to go out and secure some grant funding, or maybe you want to get into grant writing as a freelancer. It is a pretty lucrative gig, and it's certainly super, it's super rewarding. It is really fun. At least I enjoy it, which is probably good. But basically, it kind of breaks down to a couple of key spaces. So the marketing and sales space, that's really, at the heart of this. This is a marketing and sales exercise, and you have to be aware of that, because unfortunately there's a lot of the government themselves, they communicate and they say these are open competitive RFP processes, and the 2 things you need to do are submit a letter of intent and then submit a proposal. Well, the reality is that that's not actually how it works. That's how they like to say it works to everybody. But it doesn't reflect reality, unfortunately. And I'm not saying that there's corruption or anything like that happening, or cronyism. I'm just saying that, at the end of the day, the people who are deploying this capital are human beings, and they want to do a good job. And for them, doing a good job means moving money to people who aren't going to make them look dumb and where they're not going to lose their jobs. And so that mindset of our civil servants really predisposes them to doing a couple things. They're going to deploy capital to partners they know, and they're going to deploy capital to partners that are safe. So if they have the choice to move money into a small business that's partnered with another small business, or a small business that's partnered with Stanford, they're going to go with the Stanford choice frequently. And that's just a fact. So as you think about pursuing grant funding and being successful in this space, or being a successful freelancer in this space, you're going to want to really define and get really good at both marketing and sales. And that means, one, just building really real relationships, being genuine, being a good actor, doing the things you say you're going to do. It's incredible. If you just do the things you say you're going to do, you're going to rise above the crowd quickly. Because a lot of people are bad at that. They say things and then they do something else, or they just don't deliver all the way. So that's an easy thing to do, really. It just requires consistency and follow through. But the other thing that I just want to talk about is with all of this stuff, it's important to be able to be competitive. You're going to need some kind of tech stack to compete with everyone else who's out there doing these things. So getting a good tech stack in place and learning it and committing to it. I don't really have a favorite tool or suggestions to make here. The thing that I'll say is a shovel is a shovel, right? So there's a lot of different shovels out there when it comes to CRMs, a lot of different CRMs. You just need to pick one, learn it, get really good at it. And that's your tool. And the more you learn to use the tools that you have really well, the better your process is going to go. Building out basics like building out funnels, creating good, engaging content. That's all stuff you can do with things like Canva, Envato. There's a ton of great low code, no code, free tools out there. So as an entrepreneur who might be bootstrapping, as a freelancer who might not have a big roll of bills to float for your company, these are great tools. The ones I have up here, these are ones that I like because they are really hyper cost efficient. I spent the first, so after I dropped out of college, I spent around 7 years freelancing. I lived out of an 80-liter backpack, and it was great. Lived in South America, spent some time in Asia, Europe. And I got really into like minimalism and minimalist approaches to everything from business to life. And that's why that's another reason I love this tech stack is you can get most of these tools for free or like $5, things like that. And so it's not a big investment. And then the better you get with the tool, you can bring in more revenue and actually afford to like upgrade and unlock other features if you need them. So I highly recommend finding a tech stack that you love, a bunch of tools that you like, and really unpacking the process of getting really good at marketing and sales. You want to build relationships with these agencies first. You want them to know that you're someone who's trustworthy, a good actor, trusted by people in your space. And you want to then be able to execute and put together a really compelling grant proposal that looks fantastic and follows all the rules and aligns their incentives with the company that you're representing's incentives, whether that be yours or that of a client. So that's one of the first aspects that you're going to want to wrangle and like really dial in. The second thing that you're going to want to get really good at, especially in the grant space, is operations. Now, the reason for that is for a lot of these grants, you're going to need to coordinate multiple stakeholders. You're going to need to coordinate and get letters of support from people. And you're going to need to organize things like budgets and resources and timeframes. Plus, you got to fill out all this paperwork that the government's making you fill out for the grant. And you have to do it all on a deadline. So all of that combined can make for a really chaotic and terrible process. Or if you're really good and really organized, it can make for a very streamlined and efficient process. One of my favorite tools in the ecosystem to help you organize your life that's also free to access is Airtable. Asana is a close second for me, but Airtable is by and far my favorite. And one of the things that's neat about Airtable is now in this age of like no code, you can use Airtable as an actual database to power an app, and you can layer on tools like Stacker and other tools to build out, real like client-facing infrastructure so that your clients feel like they're getting a really nice high-end experience and you're spending almost no money. You don't have to hire a developer. So that's really, that's a side kind of a tangent here. But what I want to like stress here is you're going to have to be doing a lot of work. Like grant writing is not a walk in the park. It takes a lot of time, energy, effort, and coordination. So you want to figure out ways to automate wherever possible to bring a lot of efficiency to the things you're doing. So, understanding that you might have to ping an agency 3 or 4 times to get a letter of support. Well, hey, maybe you can set up a sequence of emails that automatically goes out every few days if they don't get back to you. Those are all kinds of things you can do. So you want to learn, once again, dial in a technology stack to help you automate and manage your operations, commit to using that and just get really good at it. And then set really clear boundaries and standards around like the things you're going to do and the things you're not going to do, so that you don't get into a position where you're taking on a bunch of tasks that should have been outsourced and maybe needed to be budgeted for better. That's one thing that a big caution to any freelancer in this space is maybe you feel like you can write a data collection plan. Guess what? Unless you've done it before and you know exactly what that is, you probably can't, and you shouldn't. You should hire someone who can. So there's a lot of really specific kind of specialty work that can go into grants, especially technical grants. And you're going to want to be aware of like where your strengths are and what your capabilities are and where you just shouldn't be doing things and you should be outsourcing and charging for that. So definitely, dive into that space, be aware that there's opportunities to automate, be aware that there's an entire universe of low code and no code tools out there now that make this space just so much more exciting and easier to navigate for you. So Airtable, I think, is a great starting point. If you check out Stacker or Bubble, some of the tools that I really like that are on here are Slack and HelloSign and Open Grants and Asana. Those are all really great as well. But you just want to make sure your operations side is really dialed in so that you can deliver a quality experience and a quality product. And so that everyone, generally speaking, you're executing on that follow through, which is just like above everything else. If you just like one day decide, hey, I'm going to write a grant, but then you don't do it, that's like the worst thing you can do. So the last note I'll make here, and then happy to answer questions, is as was referenced earlier, there's a lot of different complex situations that you can get into if you're receiving grant funding. from a tax standpoint, from a financial standpoint. And there's just a lot of complexities to running your own business and navigating taxes. So the main things I want to bring home here are, in terms of like your operation and you making money as an entrepreneur, you want to find a good attorney and like hang on to them. Go find a friend who's an attorney who can answer your questions, and then get a good attorney retained who can like do stuff for you. Commit to a technology stack. There's some great tools on here. Catch is amazing. It's an app that allows you to do all of like the withholding and taxes, can help you get insurance as a freelancer. It's really like an all-in-one thing that gets you the benefits of working at a big company without having to actually like work at a big company. You can be a freelancer, which I loved freelancing. It was amazing. Aslo, I need to update this this deck actually. Aslo is no longer in business. We are big fans. We've since moved to Mercury Bank, which is great. Wave is awesome. Stripe is an incredible tool to automate like payment processing. Wealthfront is another tool you can use to manage like, your investment accounts, like your Roth IRAs, things like that. Sorry. And then Upwork is another great place where you can find freelancers and scale up and scale down. So on the back office side of things, you want to make sure that you're making money. Work with people who are talented in this space. If finances are not your thing, find someone who's good at that and pay them to do that for you. It'll make a huge difference. And then also plan for the future. I think this doesn't get talked about enough for especially freelancers. Like at some point you're going to need to like, spend money on things, so figure out like savings, investment accounts, those kind of things. Make sure you're planning for your, financial future and well-being and health. So that's in a nutshell, that's how we encourage everyone to kind of approach freelancing in general, but freelance grant writing specifically, really like, just to hammer home once again, the organization aspect of it is going to be huge. Like if you're unorganized, people are going to know right away, and you're going to get into trouble really fast because there's so much to manage with a grant. So definitely, think about, and I'll make these slides available later, but think about all of these different things that you could be doing to build out your freelancing space, and focusing on like getting a good back office set up, getting a good operations set up, and really nailing sales and marketing. So over the last 7 years of like building companies and being an entrepreneur, this is some of like the lessons learned that I think are particularly relevant here. First of all, that like not all your clients are worth the time and energy. If you have someone who's just not paying you enough, or is not paying things on time, sometimes it's best to just cut the cord, let them go. Also, you're probably undervaluing yourself. As I said, there's writers on our platform. They bill anywhere from $150 to $380 an hour. So just think about that when you're thinking about what your services cost. That's like the going rate for grant writers in our world. And people are paying it. Average ticket size on the Open Grants platform. So the average contract, which is like 2 to 3 months, 1 to 3 months really, on our platform is $25,000. So on average, our grant writers are, securing a contract like that. And so just understand your value, understand the things you don't know, so you know when to outsource, and really get good at outsourcing the things that you're bad at, so that that they're getting done well. With that, I just encourage you all to, one, build good relationships with your civil servants who are around you. Build relationships with government. If you're going to get into freelancing and grant writing in general, focus on being able to tell really good stories, build relationships, streamline your operations, and make sure you have everything you need in place to like protect yourself and plan for your own future as a freelancer. So with that, I will open it back up for questions. Happy to take any questions, and I'll also stop sharing so I can go grab my LinkedIn and Twitter and share that as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Sadel, for sharing that information, and just love the approach to really looking at freelance as kind of setting up all the structures as you would as a regular business, right? And recognizing that you can outsource things that you don't necessarily want to do and build a business around your freelance grant writing work. So I appreciate that. So I think we have at least 6 or so questions, and we have 15 minutes left. So just some context for you. The first question is, at what point should founders apply for grants? Is that the idea phase or much further along?
Frankly, there's grants for everything. The idea phase is a great place to start. The reason I say that is because you can get non-dilutive capital in as your first check, and that could be amazing. That can be your first check in, and you can de-risk and then go out to investors with much better like valuation and terms. So
perfect. All right. This person is building software in the financial literacy space. Should they look into edtech, fintech, or social impact grants? How would you kind of define where they should start that search?
I mean, it really depends on your priorities, but I would start with probably like the edtech and fintech space. There's lots of cool funding there. So.
Perfect. This one's a pretty simple one. Do you recommend Salesforce at all?
I personally, I don't, but once again, I think a shovel is a shovel. There's a reason they're dominant. I think they certainly have a lot of application, especially in larger enterprises. So.
You used a term, data collection plan. What does this refer to exactly?
In a lot of technical grants, there'll be a requirement to include a data collection plan. This is really for just research, like focused things, but it's a specific plan to collect data, share data, and it requires that you specify things like the protocols that'll be used, the process for citing data, maybe the process for redistributing data to the larger research community, how you plan on archiving and maintaining that data over time. They're very specific, and once again, if you don't know what you're doing, then you should hire someone.
There you go. Awesome. Next question is, how much should the average startup budget to engage in the grant finding process?
I think that really depends on how much work you're going to do up front. So if you say, if you go out and you're like, hey, I'm a startup, I want to go find grants and I don't want to do anything, you can think maybe, between 20 and 40K for like everything, including strategy, building the relationships, writing the grant, and executing on that. If you do all the strategy work yourself and you're just hiring a grant writer, maybe 20 to 30K. Like I said, the average contract size on our platform is 25. So, those are some good general numbers to think about, I guess. And frankly, those are like medians. They're like, SBIR, we see about 10K per application, which is a smaller program. It's very concise. So it can really depend, unfortunately, a lot. But that median 25K is probably a good starting point.
Gotcha. So this one more was a comment. So please share good copywriters for grants. Is that something that you can view good copywriters on Open Grants, or where would you kind of look for those?
Yeah, that's a great place to look. So what Open Grants does, just to real quickly, we pair companies with grants, and then we connect them to people who can write the grants for them. And we actually curate and manage a lot of that talent. So that's one place to look, is Open Grants. Other places, Upwork, Guru, Freelancer, and then there's literally just grant writing shops. So those are some thoughts, I guess.
Perfect. Mehdi, you had a question. Do you want to just unmute yourself and ask?
Yeah, hey Sudal, thank you for your presentation. Yeah, that was my second time listening to your talk, and I'm really happy every time I listen to that, I get something new. Thank you for that. So 2 short questions for you. You already touched on the possibility of having grants for early stage startups or when they are at the ideation phase. So how do you see the chances of that, like percentage wise? How possible is it to get grants when you are at an early stage? And the second question is, do you have any offers for early stage startups, like discounted offers coming from you or your own startup? Thank you for that.
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. So first, on the first front, grants for early stage companies do tend to be highly competitive. So the big program that everyone knows about typically is SBIR. And that is highly competitive. I think the success rate in California, and they divide it out by states. They publish all this data, by the way. The success rate for successfully awarded SBIR awards in California is 13%. So highly competitive. There are a lot of things you can do though. So when you think about that, don't get like too caught up in it, because that includes a lot of people. Like there's a lot of universities where they just churn them out. Like they might submit 20 and hope that one gets in. So there's a high volume coming in, but they're not all high quality. So there's a lot of things you can do to be more competitive in that space. There's also other avenues you can pursue. DoD's SBIR program, much higher acceptance rate, because they just have endless amounts of money and they have tons of budget, so they just spend it all. So that's, I guess that's the short answer is, it's really competitive. There's a lot of things you can do to be highly competitive in the space though, including partnering with a university, frankly. You can also go the STTR route instead of SBIR. So SBIR is coupled with the STTR program. STTR is more research focused, and it's less competitive because a lot of people don't go that route, because there are some like nuances to navigate with IP and how it works with like the universities and the principal investigators. So we can really get into that on Fridays at 10. We host office hours. If you want to stop by sometime, happy to like pair you up with one of our SBIR experts and have them dive into that more. And what was the second part of your question? Sorry.
Yeah. So do you have any offers for early stage startups, discounted offers? And by the way, before I forget, could you please put a note for the Friday office hours? Because I have no clue how.
Yeah, I'll send that to Cameron and he can send that out to the community. But we do have offers. They're frequently through our partners, other accelerators that we work with. And I'll talk with Cameron a bit about what we might be able to do with Sac State too. And we'll get something together for the Sac State entrepreneurship community.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Cool. So the next question was related to hiring a grant writer through Open Grants. Say you didn't get awarded the grant, are you still needed and pay them the full amount regardless if you got it?
Yes. So they are consultants. They've done their job. You've done yours, and there's no real guarantee. However, I will say that like writing a grant and putting a good grant proposal together is highly valuable beyond the money. It does force you to organize your finances and really crystallize your mission and a lot of other facts about your company and get really organized. So I would, one thing is, yes, you still need to pay the person who did the work. But two, it's, it's a really good exercise to do even if you don't win.
Awesome. All right. So we got about 7 minutes left. So we got a good number of questions still coming in. So this person's building a digital health platform to assist doctors with patient charting tasks. Any recommendations on what grants to hone in on? SBIR, HHS, and it's also a female-founded company.
Yeah, two things to say. One, really quickly, is you should definitely, if you haven't done it, go to SBA, certify.sba.gov, I believe is the site, and get certified as a woman-owned business if you haven't done that yet. You can also get certified as a woman-owned business in California. It's not a lengthy process, but you do have to do it in order to actually get like the advantage that comes from being female-founded. And it's a bit weird, but that's how the government works. So there you go. I would say, depending on how early you are, SBIR is a great fit. NIH, SBIR. Within NIH, there's a ton of different institutes that study different things. And so that might be the place. NSF, also good programs. So that's what I would say.
All right. Does Open Grants include state and private grants as well?
We do, yep.
All right, cool. Next one is, I understand that there is some regulation that prohibits hiring grant writers on contingency. Do you have more information on that or thoughts on how it impacts equitable access?
Yes, and this is, I have a whole soapbox about this, but what I will say is that generally speaking, grant writers who are trying to be hired on contingency don't do a great job. Their business model is like churn out a lot of grants and then hope that some of them hit. So not probably the best outcome for your company that way. And there's federal regulation that prohibits a lot of that frequently. So there's a huge problem with equitable access to grant funding through the government. And we are actively working to solve that at Open Grants with a variety of tools. However, of course, as with anything in government, it takes a while to affect change. Some things that I will say, though, on that front is the federal government does actually pay for consultants to help support grant writing. And unfortunately, a lot of people are just unaware that those resources even exist. So there are some tools to kind of support equitable access. They're just not really well known, and the programs are a little hard to navigate. If you come to Open Grants and you tell us what you're working with and there's some real like equity issues, we'll do everything we can to like help you navigate through that space. And then we would love for you to reach out because we will be launching 4 different demonstration projects, and we'd love you to participate where we're actually like turning this whole process on its head and running basically weighted lotteries so that it does become truly equitable and accessible. So that's, I have written papers on that. You can check out some of our blogs and things on my Twitter account. I talk at length about this. It's a big issue.
Awesome. So you shared your LinkedIn and Twitter. One participant's wondering if they're able to access your email address to ask further questions, or is it best for them to attend the office hours, or what's your approach, Sidel?
Office hours is ideal. We're just full transparency here. We're in the midst of a raise. We have a lot going on as a company. We just went from 4 employees to 6. We're going to 10 shortly. So if you email me, chances might be that it gets answered in like a month, unfortunately. I will do my very best to be responsive, but emailing is not necessarily the best way to get a hold of me right now. Tweet at me, message me on LinkedIn. I, as part of my work during the day, I actually go on those platforms and engage. So that might be a better way to connect. Office hours is the best way to, like, if you want to talk to me or someone on my team about grants, office hours far and away the best option. And I'll send info out about that. You'll be able to meet with someone curated from our community for an hour and really get into whatever issues you want to unpack or questions you have. Be much better than like trying to snag half hour with me, just because I'm frankly quite busy at the moment. So I try to make myself accessible. But if you want some really good, like, dedicated attention from someone who knows what they're doing, office hours is the way to go.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll make sure we get the link, or I don't know if they have to register, but we'll get that information to you all about the office hours that take place on Fridays. And so we have, I think, let's do 1 or 2 more, and then that'll get us to 2 o'clock and we can conclude. So what might one expect as a salary or rate to include in the funding needs? They're new to this, so not sure this is even an answerable question, but I'm not sure if you're kind of looking at maybe going through accessing a grant writer, what would that kind of salary or rate typically look like?
Yeah, for good talent in this space, anywhere from $150 to $380 an hour seems to be the range. And that really depends on if they're highly technical and working on technical grants, or if they're like more on the foundation side. It's more about storytelling. So that's, some general guidance there.
All right. The last question that we'll have time for is any specific platforms that are preferred for grant funding for nonprofit companies or reentry populations? I probably can guess what your answer would be.
Yeah, I'll say 2 answers here. So one is Open Grants, of course, for obvious reasons that we've built something really cool. And I'm very proud of that, and would love your feedback if you get on and find something that's lacking. But the other place, so there is a company that specifically focuses on just foundation funding only, and they're called Instrumental. You do have to have at least 100K in annual revenues to access their tool. It's quite expensive. Open Grants is free. We built this to be a resource for everyone to be able to navigate all of this funding. We have private, we have federal, we have state, we have some local, not all of it, but by the end of the quarter, we'll have everything. And so I encourage you to reach out there. And as we're nearing the end here, just another note here, if you've messaged me privately on this chat, maybe Cameron can kind of send me some of that. I do appreciate the comments, and sorry if I haven't been able to address all of those things as we've talked.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'll see your private chats. I wish I had those special powers to see what people are private chatting, but I will make sure that one, We'll send out the PDF of the slides that Sadell shared with us, the recording that we have here, as well as just ways to access Sadell and the Open Grants team through their office hours, as well as LinkedIn. So I'll get that information from Sadell and get that to all of you. But thank you for being here. Thank you, Sadell, for sharing your knowledge with us and your experience. And hopefully some of our entrepreneurs on here can access some grants and hop on Open Grants and be successful. So thank you all for being here, and have a great rest of your day, and best of luck. So thanks again.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.